The oldest verifiable brewery has been found in a burial site in a cave near Haifa in modern-day Israel, associated with the Natufian culture. Researchers have found residue of 13,000-year-old beer that may have been used for rituals to honor the dead. In the Rakafet cave where Natufian beer was found, Liu and Wang unearthed residual remains of starch and microscopic plant particles known as phytolith, which are typical in the transformation of wheat and barley to booze. The researchers believe that the Natufians used a three-stage brewing process. First, starch of wheat and barley would be turned into malt. This happens by germinating the grains in water to then be dried and stored. Then the malt would be mashed and heated. Finally, it would be left to ferment with airborne wild yeast. All of the steps provided clues to help the researchers make their claim. To test their hypothesis, the researchers conducted a series of experiments to recreate each step the Natufians would have taken to brew their beer. These brewing experiments allowed the researchers to study how starch granules changed during the brewing process and make comparisons to what they discovered. Liu and Wang's brewing experiments showed a clear similarity to what the Natufians did. Evidence of the first ever wine was found in the Hajj Firuz Tepe archaeological site in Iran. It is younger than a Natufian beer by around 60 centuries. Grapes are unique for being one of the few natural sources of tartaric acid, which is the most abundant acid in wine and often crystallizes into deposits that are left in containers that have held wine. Grapes also have a natural propensity to break down into alcohol by a process that we now know as fermentation, where the yeast on the grape skin metabolize the sugar in the grapes into alcohol. This happens most readily in a closed container that is kept in room temperature. Whether or not the action was deliberate, storing grapes in jars that were then embedded in the floor would have created conditions favorable for wine production. The presence of the terebinth resin deposits in the same container as the wine gave a stronger indication that winemaking was perhaps deliberate in the Hajj Firuz Tepe. Resin has a long history of being used as an ancient sealant and preservative, even before it became associated with winemaking by the ancient Greeks. The volume that was stored, 54 liters, also seems to indicate large-scale production beyond just household usage of the food product for sustenance. Additionally, archaeologists found clay stoppers corresponding to the size of the opening of the jars nearby that also suggest a deliberate attempt at long-term preservation and protection from air exposure.